Hey, welcome back to Pagitt Radio, broadcasting live out of the Twin Cities, and today over at Solomon's Porch, it's the May 9th edition of the radio show, and we're pleased to have Jim Wallis with us today. Jim, thanks for being here. Really thrilled to have you. It's super good to have your to have your voice in the Twin Cities. Congratulations on all the work that you're doing, and you're on a book tour.
Well, it's a book tour, but really it's trying to spark a national conversation on the common good. Mm-hmm. So we're having common good forums all across the country in very different kinds of places with very different kinds of people, and that's what I enjoy the most.
So you've been you're at the end of this leg of the tour of Stringing Around, and I asked people who pay attention to the show and so on, what should we ask Jim Wallis? And one of the things that I thought was so interesting, they said, have them tell us stories of good things that are happening. Isn't that interesting? A lot of people feel like there's just so many things that aren't quite right in this world, you know?
Well, the book.
What have you seen in the conversations you've been in?
The book is full of those kinds of stories because people come to these events, Doug, and they're hungry. They're hungry for the first line of the book says, "Our life together can be better," and people are hungry for that. But they walk in, and they're really cynical about politics, about Washington, about Wall Street. And I say, skepticism is a good and healthy thing. Be skeptical, ask hard questions. But cynicism is spiritually dangerous because cynicism is a buffer against personal commitment. Things can't change, so I'm going to pull back and disengage, form some security around myself. And the people and structures in power, they actually like our cynicism. Yeah. Because it keeps us from engaging. And what makes change...
Isn't that interesting? So you think there might be a little effort to propagate cynicism?
Well, I think
the elites.
Well, I think the elites are certainly making us cynical, and it may be part of their strategy. Because I did a sabbatical to write this book, and so my discipline was to not be interviewed or write or speak about the political narrative first 3 months of the election year. Wow. And every morning I'd get up and I'd have some quiet exercise and read and write all day. At night, though, I'd watch the news cycle. And the more I did, the more depressing it really was. The vitriol, the anger, the fear, the hatred, the polarization, paralyzation, and the media loves conflict. So you'd switch the one cable to the other, and the content was different, but the tone was very similar. And we've lost this ancient idea called the common good. It goes back centuries. And so the first half of the book is how do we re-inspire the common good. This is the most biblical, theological book I've written in a long time. How the Gospels really, in fact, let me just start this quote. I found this cool quote. This is the rule.
That you wrote or somebody
else?
No,
not me. No. Somebody else.
I forgot about this cool thing.
This is the rule of the most perfect Christianity. Its most exact definition, its highest point, namely the seeking of the common good. For nothing can so make a person an imitator of Christ as caring for his neighbors. John Chrysostom, 347 to 407, an early church father, was talking about the common good. We've lost that. I think politics and the media are adversaries of the common good now. They're controlled by the extremes, well-funded extremes, and people are feeling homeless, politically and otherwise, and they want the common good. So the book is full of stories about the common good. You want a story?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, give
so,
us one.
Of course.
In the middle of that big debate about the Ground Zero Mosque and a couple years ago, and Daisy Khan and Faisal.
This is at the World Trade Center.
So So Faisal Roth, the imam, and Daisy, his wife, they're friends of mine, and so they're going to build this center, and it got all this controversy, and they said, "What, Jim? What do we do?" So I had to be on TV every night saying, "My friends aren't terrorists."
And, they're my friends.
And there was a Florida pastor who was saying he was going to burn Korans. This guy had like 18 people in his church, but he became an international figure. And you shouldn't burn Korans. And I was pleading with CNN to tell the story, a positive story. So finally, on that Sunday morning, they did. A year later, Heart Song Church outside of Memphis, Tennessee, which is totally upset about Muslims passing laws against Sharia law in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Sharia law was about to take over Tennessee.
Right,
you know?
right, yeah, we've seen that.
It's always a
he
big
heard
threat.
Steve Stone, evangelical Methodist pastor. He heard that the Memphis Islamic Cultural Center was coming to his neighborhood. So he put out this sign on his front lawn. Heart Song Church welcomes Memphis Islamic Cultural Center. The Muslims were astonished. And so they came a couple of days later. Are you the pastor? Yes. We were hoping to be ignored. but you welcomed us. Why? Because Jesus said we should welcome our neighbors. And so welcome, neighbors. We hear you across the street. Now, we don't know much about Islam. We'd like to learn. Yeah. So their pork barbecues begin to include halal meat, and they begin to tutor inner city kids. And then Ramadan comes, and they said, could we use your basement? We don't have a building yet. He says, how about the sanctuary? So here they are in CNN. A year later, the imam and the pastor, you can tell they know each other. You can tell they respect each other. You can even think they like each other.
Might even like each other.
So I called Steve. Steve, first time all week, I'm proud to be a Christian. And he says, can I tell you what a call I had last night? A call from a room full of Muslim men in Pakistan, Kashmir, Pakistan, the most conflicted place in the world, or one of them. They said, is this Pastor Stone? He says, yes. We watched the CNN segment together, all of us. We were silent for a long time. Then one of us said, I think God may be speaking to us through this man. Another one said, how can we kill these people? Another one who can't speak English, so I'll tell you what he did. He went to the little Christian church near our mosque, and with his own hands, he washed the inside and the outside of that church. So we've all come back here now in this room. It's 1:30 a.m. in Tennessee. He says, we want to tell your congregation, Pastor, we don't hate them. We love them. And because of what you did, we're going to take care of that little Christian church for the rest of our lives. Now, what works better in Pakistan, drones or loving your neighbor?
Yeah. Now, Jim, see, that's interesting because you get to move in two worlds, right? You get to move in this high-powered political world, at least powerful in the political realm, right? And you get to meet with and influence presidential candidates and talk to senators and all that. But it seems like your real hope is in regular people's lives that aren't in those positions and in communities of faith, that they're going to make the difference in the world that we live in, more so than getting the right opinion out of a person who's in a position of political influence.
The common good comes last to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And only social movements change politics and history. And so I care about those social movements. The people in Washington, D.C., on immigration, for example, what they tell me is the faith community, you've given us the space to do the right thing. You've given us the space to work together and be bipartisan. They're never bipartisan. But the faith community has really provided the space. And so, yeah, I talk to them, but I think it's social movements of real people. This book is about how we can make decisions in our households, our families, our congregations, our communities, neighborhoods, our nation. Those decisions are what change history and even Washington, not the people who think they're powerful in D.C. It's despite them, not because of them.
Well, what do you think it is that keeps people from doing that? Like, if you listen to people like Rick Warren, they have this, I think, helpful and interesting perspective that religious communities are the most integrated and most dispersed social networks in the world, right? Like, churches are in more places in the world, mosques are in more places. Like, everywhere you go, where there's human beings, there's social organisms, and those social organisms have churches and mosques and synagogues within them. So why is it, do you think, with all of that social equity that exists, all of that social construct, why do you think so many people feel so powerless? Like, how come it's so hard? Why does it work for you to be able to go around and say to people, hey, we should care about the common good? Like, how come people aren't like, oh, that old thing, Jim, we've been doing that for years? Like, what do you think it is that keeps regular people from doing this in this 260-year experiment, at least in the United States?
You know, I do a quiz on these audiences. What's the largest growing religious affiliation in the country? And of course, it's the none of the aboves.
Yeah.
You know, Now, I love the nuns. I love the other nuns, too.
Jim Wallis, the nuns.
The N-O-N-Es and the N-U-Ns.
Well, the N-U-Ns I love, too. In fact, I used to go to these really conservative Christian colleges in the Midwest, and there'd be 2 rows, every time, 2 rows of Catholic sisters in their full garb, and they'd be there sitting. And I said, "Sisters, why are you here?" They said, "Well, we're local, and we heard you were coming." I said, "Yeah? And this is a very conservative place, so we thought somebody should have your back." So I've had nuns for bodyguards for years, right?
They're watching over.
But I love the N-O-N-E-S because most of them believe in God. They just don't affiliate with religion because of what they see and don't see. Here's the simple thing. When we as people of faith actually do and say what our faith says we should do and say, when Christians actually do what Jesus said to do, like Steve Stone did in Tennessee, 2 things happen. It surprises people, and then it attracts them, right? So we have social equity in the church, but often we're still caught up in our own sanctuaries and bubbles in our own group, and we're very predictable sociologically. They look at who we are sociologically. Our theology doesn't trump our sociology. When we move out into the streets, the whole idea of the incarnation is in Jesus Christ, God hits the streets. And when we do that, and when, as John Chrysostom says, we serve the common good, that's what changes things. Now, I talk in the book about how you've got to deal with the issues of justice. The biblical notions of justice, the words, are about making things right. So just taking care of the victims and the symptoms isn't biblical justice. So we have to have a serious conversation about not just rescuing women and children from trafficking, for example, which is powerful, but how do you change trafficking? How do you make that right? Education, homelessness, whatever we care about, how do you make things right and not just take care of the victims?
All right, Jim, I'm going to take a little break here on the video, but then I want to come back and I want to ask you about this. So Victoria here was going to pick up in a minute. That's Jim Wallis. The book is called On God's Side, and we're broadcasting live out of the Twin Cities, Pagitt Radio.